Welcome back to Context. We are joined today by Gus Argenal, Associate Head Men's Basketball Coach at Cal State Fullerton. Gus, thank you for being with us today.
I'm fired up. It's great to see you.
You too. So, Coach, why don't you take us through your background as a coach? How did you end up in this profession? What led to you getting your first job and any subsequent jobs?
That would go back to just growing up in the Bay Area. I was so lucky. My dad was a Cal grad. He used to take me to Cal basketball games growing up, and I thought I was going to be Jason Kidd, and then I realized that I'm really not that athletic. I'm 5'11", Nicaraguan guy that just can't move that well. So, but I fell in love with the game really early, and I fell in love with the game through Excel basketball camp, which was run by Frank Alaco, who's now an athletic director at USF. It ended up being my high school coach, and I went there as a third grader, and I had a tiny bit of success when I was in third grade. I won the one-on-one championship for the third graders. I was a roly-poly, a little bit overweight. I think I was just bodying people getting to the rim, and I ended up winning. And that was like my first tidbit of like success, and fell in love with it. And then I went to De La Salle High School, and I was able to play for Lou Reynaud, who ended up being a college basketball coach for 20 plus years at Cal, Rice, all over Santa Barbara as well. I played for him for 1 year, and then kind of a dream come true. And probably to get to your question, why you become a coach, there are certain people that come in your life, and we all have had them. And you and I have had them in different coaches that we've been around. But Frank Alaco came back in my life as my high school basketball coach. And really, I always say I have my father, and then I have one B in him, in Frank Alaco. And just inspired me. I mean, I felt like I could do anything. He taught me so much about being a good person, working hard, thinking that what you're doing is working hard, but really you're not, forcing yourself to do the things that you don't want to do so you can become the person you want to become. And I was just so lucky to play for him. And we were really good. We had great success. And I just thought, wow, if I can inspire somebody like he's inspired me, if I can be a piece of somebody's journey like he was for me, then what better profession than this? And before, my dad is a doctor, and my mom took care of us at home. And my dad was like an extremely hard worker, like just an absolute beast. And I remember as I got into college and I was at UC Davis and I was talking about what I wanted to do, I said, Dad, I think I want to be a college coach. And I remember my dad was just did not understand that. Like, what is a college basketball coach? What are you talking about? And I just remember the one quote that always sticks in my mind is, well, if you're going to do it, you better be the best, or try to be your best. Right. And so, for me, having somebody that accepted that and went with it, I went on to Davis and played there. And again, I was really, really lucky that Coach Alaco had connections to Davis, and the Davis coaches thought that I could somehow bring the ball up against pressure and actually run their system and be a part of what they were doing. And I had a couple different schools that recruited me, but going up in July, the summer before my junior or senior, I'm trying to remember, maybe my senior year, I remember showing up there and there was a huge girls volleyball tournament going on at UC Davis. And I thought, wow, if this is what campus is like every day, then Davis might be the spot for me. But going up to Davis and kind of seeing campus, and this one I want to get back to, is all these people in your life and what gets you into coaching or gets you into your job. Bill Tressel recruited me. He saw me over the summer and thought, I guess somehow I kind of turned his eye, and again, he started recruiting me. And I remember coming up in the fall, and this guy named Justin Climo's on a golf cart and is there to pick up my dad and me and drives us around campus. And, so like somebody like you was actually it was part of my journey, my recruiting journey, and it all comes together. But I go there and I'm able to get recruited there. And throughout the journey of picking out a college, I had no idea that the people I would be around at that school would end up being my foundation of my coaching. You get so lucky in certain places you go, and I can name 30 people from Davis, 40 people, 50 people that are all part of that tree. And I think all of us, the hope is that you can be a part of that. So I had Coach Alaco that got me inspired. I went to Davis and I got to see it on the college level. And I thought, wow, I even like that better than maybe wanting to be a high school coach for me. I thought, oh, this is cool, being able to recruit your own team and kind of control who is on your roster. And I thought, wow, the Division II level looks like a perfect balance You don't know what the coaches are doing. You think they're just sitting in there talking, having fun, watching videos, drawing up cool plays. You don't know that they're dealing with buying you Subway sandwiches and getting gear ready and doing all the things that goes into coaching. But it just looked so fun to me and so inspiring. And I played for Brian Fogel, and I was so lucky that he recruited me. And I always say he came into my house. My parents were divorced, and I still remember the recruiting visit, him sitting down in my front room and doing like what you see on the movies, the blue chips, right? Except mine was not blue chips, right? I wasn't getting cars and all those things, but I was.
There's no bag of cash.
There's no bag of cash. I was not Penny Hardaway. I was not Shaq dunking the ball in a small gym in Louisiana. But I just go back to, at a young age, I was lucky that I got to see really good people doing their job, and it ended up being the job that I fell in love with wanting to do. And Brian Fogel was awesome. He took me under his wing and really taught me like how to be disciplined and the Davis way of doing things at the time, which was coming off a national championship, which you were a part of. And I was just, man, I'm coming from De La Salle. I'm going to Davis. Like, this is the perfect world. And it really was for me. You know, it wasn't perfect basketball wise, but that's what you want. And I think in coaching and life, you want to have struggle. You know, you want to be the red shirt that is getting his butt kicked by all the seniors and doesn't know what is going on, is going back to the dorms, crying in his dorm because he misses home, even though I only lived an hour away. That's how soft I was, right? You know, then you want to be the redshirt freshman that's getting his chance. Then you want to be the redshirt or the sophomore that thinks he should be playing more and isn't, and realizes that it's his fault that he's not. Then you want to be the junior that is starting off great and he gets hurt and kind of loses momentum and somebody passes him up. And then you want to be the senior that at the end of it, you know, kind of sees it all come together and you end up having a great end of your season. And I went through a coaching change, and Gary Stewart came in at the end of my career. So I saw that as well. And I've used that for myself as a coach now. And so, you know, as a player, I got to see all these things, and I ended my career great. And again, coaching the aspect of it, you know, like you said, how did you get into this? Well, I was just so fortunate. And I'm somebody that has had a lot of stops. I haven't had the one school and you work your way up one place. I've been all over. And I was lucky that Ron Dubois was one of the assistant coaches at UC Davis my last year. And he said, hey, you want to get into coaching? Well, you got to write all these emails. You got to try to work camps. And I had worked Duke camp. I had worked North Carolina camp. I'd worked Maryland camp. I'd worked everywhere in the country I could get my foot in the door through my sophomore, junior, senior year. And not a lot had come from that. I'd met a ton of people, which was great, but I still need a job. And he got me in the door at the Final Four with meeting with the Arizona State assistant coach, Dan O'Dowd. And we sit there for an hour or two and hang out and talk hoop. And he was a really nice guy. And 2 months later, I'm driving with everything I have from UC Davis to Arizona State, and your coaching career begins. And now I'm going in my 17th year of coaching, and it's been phenomenal. You know, and again, I'd be not a very smart guy if I didn't mention that at Davis, probably, and you and I have talked about this, I was able to meet my wife who played college basketball at Davis as well. So for coaches, you know, having somebody that understands what your passion is, it's a job of passion that you hope you can get paid for enough to support your family. I have 2 boys, but she's been on board with that since I guess I was 22 when I was leaving UC Davis, you know, and she was so on board and has been on board since, you know, 17 seasons later. Yeah, and she was cheering me on when I played at Davis. She comes to every game she can come to now. And that to me is, you know, the coaching family. We have so many people in our life now, 17 seasons later, that we wouldn't have if I wouldn't have coached. So I was very lucky to get people that placed me in coaching. And then I think that once you get in or get lucky enough to be around people, it's how you treat people. It's how you connect with people. You and I have connected since I was 18 or 17 years old, and you and I are still connected. You've tried to help me with players along the road. You've helped me in career decisions along the road. And so I've been so lucky that I've had mentors, you, Brian Fogel, Bob Williams, Diedrich Taylor, Brandon Laird, Kevin Nosik. I mean, I could, Ron Dubois, Gray Klink, I could go a billion. I'm right now I'm insulting somebody because I haven't named him. Right. That's how many people have come through our Davis tree and our coaching tree. So in a long, long way, that's how I got into coaching. I was very fortunate to have people that gave me a chance and took a chance on me and allowed me to play basketball at Davis, and then also fulfill a dream, and gave me confidence too. I think that you have to have people that believe in you. And I was very fortunate that people saw something in me as a leader, not as a great player, because I was not that, but as somebody that can maybe inspire others and lead others. And so here I am today, and it really, just because I've been able to be around really, really good people.
Well, you have such a unique journey relative to the others that I've talked about or talked with, excuse me, on the pod, is that you haven't had this long stop in one place. You've been moving as opportunities present themselves. And that what you just mentioned is the leadership piece and being able to inspire others. That was Tressler's biggest deal. And hey, we got to get this guy, 25 years ago. And I think that's played out throughout your career. So once you land at Arizona State and you're there as a 22-year-old, eyes wide open, hair blown back, and then you've had a number of stops since, and you could talk about those specifically, but what did you realize right away as that 22-year-old that you needed to figure out? And then at each subsequent stop, after you probably figured out or realized I have some of this figured out, that you still didn't know at each of those stops?
Well, again, if you know my resume, it's a lot of stops, so you have to buckle up right now. But immediately you realize that, like, you're in this. And when you drive across country, I think with every one of us, I always say, at that time you had CDs. So when you pop in that Bob Seger CD and you're driving, by yourself, on the highway, and you're thinking about your life. I think all of us go through that, whether it's driving to college or it's when you leave college and you're going through that tough transition, is what is my passion? Am I going to stick with this? And I think that very quickly I knew there was no second decision. There was no, I think people call it now burn the boats. There was no alternative for me. I just knew that this was what I wanted to do in some form. And I was hoping that it would be college basketball. Right when I got to Arizona State, I realized that, wow, I'm at the highest level of basketball in my first stop. And that was a dream. And I realized very quickly that this game I could fulfill so many dreams that I had. I was a guy that growing up, I had every press clipping of my favorite players on my wall. When I was a college player, I was in love with the Duke basketball team in terms of how they played. And I wanted to be Chris Duhon as a 20-year-old that was his age. Mm-hmm. So I had no ego with that. Mm-hmm. When I was in 5th grade, I had a state report for Michigan. And I remember that was the year that Chris Webber and all them went to the Fab Five, and I got in trouble because I kept on bringing press clippings in for my current events on the basketball team instead of about the state of Michigan. So very quickly I realized, wow, I can achieve some things in my life that are going to make me feel really special about my career. I also realized that I had no idea of the inner workings of a basketball office. Mm-hmm. I had no idea how to do film exchange. Back then you had VHS tapes that went up. You did this for a long time. That went up this high, about 13 rows of about 4 feet high of VHS tapes that I was sending out, getting back, right now, for me to even explain it, it'd be like explaining people how to use a VHS, which nobody knows how to do. So I was doing that. I suddenly realized that there are certain hour limits you have in practice, and I was in charge of that. And making sure we were following the NCAA rules. I was in charge of hosting recruits in terms of driving around on golf carts every day. I was in charge of checking every single class that every single student athlete was on. I had to check Ike Diagu, who's a former Warrior and longtime NBA player. I had to go to his house every morning and make sure he was up and ready to roll for class. And he'd be in there singing, cooking breakfast. He'd have me come in and eat breakfast with him some days. So you learn that there is so much that goes on just to get your team to the door. Right. And there's so much recruiting that goes on. And I learned that if I was going to be anybody, I needed to learn how to recruit. And I was very young, and I got an opportunity to come back to my alma mater after Davis and go to Arizona State, go back to Davis from Arizona State. And Gary Stewart gave me a chance. And I learned how hard it was to coach players that you had played with. Mm-hmm. Being a young guy and coaching somebody or teaching somebody that was your peer and you played with them. And I learned how to communicate better. I learned how to separate myself at Davis from the players, but also still be their friend. Mm-hmm. I learned that every coach wants something different. Gary Stewart, I can still remember this. You talk about being tedious. He wanted me to make a fact sheet for him. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, like, okay, that's not hard. He said, I want it to look like this one. LA Community College was a really good junior college at the time. They had a really cool one. He made me do that fact sheet 30, 40 times until it was what he wanted. And I realized that your first time you bring something to the table, it better be your best. Mm-hmm. Your first impression is your best impression, and doing your work at a high level. I learned that I wasn't a good enough recruiter. I thought I knew everything. I go in there and suddenly, wow, Greg Klink showing me that I don't know much. I'm calling Kevin Ostek, hey, how did you recruit this or do that? Talking to somebody like you, Ron Dubois helping me recruit. You're learning what is your niche. Mm-hmm. And Gary Stewart taught me that I need to know more than anybody in the room how to present to a team. I thought I knew how to do that. And suddenly I'm going to scout Nevada, and gosh, I knew it. But by the time I was done talking, the players had no idea what I just said. They weren't going to be able to execute. I knew how to become simple. And then again, you can stop me at any time, coach, but I'm just going to go through it.
Well, really quickly, before we go to your next stop, because I think it's going to allow us to talk about some of these things in more depth. Without the opportunity to try and fail, the learning curve probably isn't as quick, right? And so learning how to scout, great, but now you got to deliver that content to your team, right? Without being able to go out there and fall on your face, how are you going to get better with that, right? Learning how to recruit and thinking you know the pieces and then realizing you don't know what you're doing. So talk about the resiliency that comes from that and the feedback loops that are crucial to growth, both as an assistant and, maybe as you're talking to athletes.
Well, I think that it's one is you have to realize who you're recruiting for, what they want, what type of player they want. And I think that what you just said is there's so many times you fall on your face, but part of it is being super organized, just in terms of a tangible part of it. I remember being at Davis, and the first time Greg Kling sat me down and said, hey, create a mail out calendar for the next 4 months. And that was, what are you talking about? A mail out calendar? Yeah, I want you to send out a piece of paper that shows student athletes about where we eat, where they're going to live, our style of play, what Davis is about, the location, our coaching staff. So right there, that was something that just has always stuck with me, right? In different ways, you always have a plan of what you're going to do. You realize that you bringing somebody to campus is a really big deal. Suddenly this player comes to campus. It's not your recruit, it's our recruit, but it is going to come back to you if you haven't prepared our staff and you haven't prepared this visit so that we have our best chance to get it done. And you go through failures, you go through success of that. I think that at times as a recruiter, you think you know what will work, but unless you know your style of play, unless you know your university extremely well, you don't. I knew Davis really well. As I went on, I went to UTSA and I went to Chico and I went to Rice and I went to Nevada. You have to learn what works at those universities. The same athlete cannot go to UTSA that goes to Rice. Yep. It's a different student athlete. So you have to understand your audience. You have to understand how you're recruiting them and how you're bringing them to the table and what you're selling to make them want to be a part of your university.
And what did you learn over time was the best way to quickly do that, given the frequency of your moves and the short time you may have at any one particular stop to have an impact on that program? What did you finally realize, like even just getting to Fullerton, right? What's the quickest way to wrap your head around what type of athletes, who am I working for, which players are going to work with this individual? What did you learn over the years from an experience standpoint to get to that quickly?
Well, you have to be very direct. And I've been in a situation where multiple times I've come in July, June, when the recruiting period's starting, and you have to see where they're going with their recruiting. And you're not going to come in and push everybody around and say, hey, I know best. That's not how any of us would be. But especially myself, I just feel like with every year you're somewhere, every 6 months you're somewhere, that program gets 20% more of you. And they realize that, wow, this guy can do this. This is who he is. This is what he is. And you realize 20% more of Cal State Fullerton basketball needs this type of a player. They need somebody that really, really, really cares about being in the gym a lot. They need somebody that is going to be productive on their own. They need somebody that doesn't care about playing in front of 40,000 people. Or you learn at UC Davis that they need somebody that can do their work by themselves on a Sunday afternoon, knowing that they've had a hard week of practice and they don't need 30 tutors. They need to be academically responsible. You learn that at Chico State, you have to have somebody that's really tough that can take having to hop in a van and drive down to the airport in a 2-hour drive before you get on a trip. You learn somebody that has to be responsible socially at Chico State, because that type of kid might not flourish at Chico. And everybody says, oh, no, he's a really good kid. But everybody's a good kid. You're not going to – and again, when I say that, I believe that. I believe that everybody's got a great part of them, but some kids can't have success there. At East Bay, you realize that, okay, if they are from East Bay, well, from that area, they might not want to go to that school. And there's reasons why. Maybe where they're coming from in Oakland isn't a great area. And you have to, again, piece all of that together quickly and know the game plan of the program you're walking into, and slowly you can insert aspects of that. And I'll give you an example here at Fullerton. Coach Taylor has recruited every type of student athlete: junior college, freshman, 4-year transfer, kick down, kick up, whatever it may be. He's been everything. And at a Cal State University, that's usually kind of how it goes. You're able to get different types of student athletes, which is great, a great diversity of people. He won and went to the NCAA tournament with a team that was mostly filled with 4-year high school student athletes, which was the same thing that happened at UC Davis when he was a player. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the past, Fullerton had gone to the NCAA tournament with junior college and transfer players. Mm-hmm. But at the time when I came in here, they needed a little bit more influx of age and some more, older people. And that fit me well, coming from Nevada, where we had recruited transfers. Mm-hmm. So we picked up and recruited some transfers here now. So again,
so it's what can you add value to the program and what it needs? And it's almost like, to your point, and we'll jump to East Bay here in a second, but when you realize what the gaps are and how do you fill those with support versus having to hit the reset button. And so, it seems like you've been able to fill that niche based on your experience, and that's what's, made you valuable to all these different programs. When you became the head coach at East Bay, and you've had a long journey before that, a bunch of different spots, many mentors, probably felt pretty good about your ability to run that program from the minute you walked in the door. And at the same time, I would imagine that, within 24 hours, you realized that there were a few things you had to figure out. What were those like?
I think that, you think and then you never know. But I did feel very prepared. And again, leading up to that point, I worked for Rob Evans at Arizona State. I worked for Gary Stewart at UC Davis. I worked for Brooks Thompson at UTSA, Greg Klink at Chico State, and Ben Braun at Rice. Some really decorated Hall of Fame level, National Coach of the Year honored type people. All had gone to the NCAA tournament in respective places. Mm-hmm. I felt super prepared in running a program because of Greg Klink, let's say, his culture and what he did on a day-to-day basis at the Division II level to make sure that every day you were doing something productive for your program. I felt offensively I could run a ball screen motion because I'd been around Jim Less. I felt like I knew how to fundraise because I'd been around one of the best of Ben Braun. I knew how to handle administration because of Ben Braun. I knew how to hold the players accountable because of Rob Evans. I knew how I wanted to get the players in shape, and I knew how I wanted to play defensively because of Gary Stewart. I knew how I wanted to run a secondary break because of Brooks Thompson. Now, at the same time, all the ideas that you have when you get to a certain place don't always fit. The way you want to play doesn't fit your personnel. Your administration doesn't have the finances that you thought they would for equipment. In 4 years, I had 4 athletic directors. So that's 4 different missions. And I've worked with 4 great people. Mm-hmm. But each year, my mission and some of the values changed. Never that we didn't want to serve the student athlete, but how we were going to go about that changed. Your scholarship budget changes from year to year because of that. Mm-hmm. Now, what I knew going into East Bay was that it was going to take time. And I've never been somebody that I had to win now, because my goal in all of this is the relationships with the players. Mm-hmm. I know I'm a good coach. I'm confident in that. I know that the programs I've been in are good programs, not because if we won or lost, is because we did it the right way. Mm-hmm. So I knew that at East Bay, no matter what my win-loss record at the end of it was, I was going to have great success. Mm-hmm. And so I just stuck to, am I improving us daily? Mm-hmm. This is where it is now. And Bob, I'd taken over a program for Bob Biggs that had success at the Division III level. He had success early on in the Division II level, but now it was in the CC2 era of scholarships, and every program was starting to get full scholarships. And we were at the bottom of that in terms of our money. And every program would argue, shoot, Sonoma State had less scholarships than we did. And they were, Coach Fiscaldo was extremely successful. So that wasn't part, but it was part of just understanding, wow, okay, every single day, my organization, and I always tell this story, when I went to Chico State with Greg Klink, we walked in the office and Puck Smith had done just an unbelievable job. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He called me last week. We're still extremely close. And that's a whole nother coaching tree that we hated at Davis. Mm-hmm. Those were our rivals. Okay. So, and they brought me in. So I've had people like that, but Klink and I decided we're going to take every single thing out of this office. Not because it wasn't awesome and because it wasn't great, but we need to restart this in our own way. We took every single thing other than two of those little desks that you have like in college classrooms that the desk is connected to the chair. We took everything out and just those two chairs and our computers. And we started from there. And we got new desks and we got new. And when I got to East Bay, I took every single thing out except one of those desks. And I said, I'm just going to restart and reboot this my way. And I think that when you are yourself, I think one thing that I've always been is true to myself. It was a dream job to be at East Bay. It was like being coaching the Warriors. And so I just looked at what are the things I want to be successful with. I want to have great academics. I want to bring in good people. I don't want student athletes to get in trouble. And slowly we will win. And we slowly did that. You know, we had almost a 3.0 GPA for 4 years. We had the highest win total in the CC2 era when I left. We were getting guys on the NABC honors court. We had, you know, we were doing good things. We were getting votes in the top 25. But even at that, I still look back and I go, man, I wish I could have even been more successful. And I wish I would have done this, and that. I didn't know how important scheduling was. I didn't know how important alignment with your athletic director was. I didn't know that at times the way that you manage yourself in the department with all the other coaches was going to be more important maybe than anything else you did. I didn't know that I couldn't coach this type of player, but I could coach this type of player. And at times I look back and I say, I had a great plan, but again, I could have always made that plan a little bit better. So you learn so much. I mean, I look back on it. I'm so thankful I did it because I was at a crossroads at Rice. Do I go to a high major assistant job? Do I stay at Rice for another year or two? And I just thought that cutting your teeth as a head coach, and again, you've been a head coach for longer than you can remember now. The coach that I was at year one compared to the coach I was at year 4 is so different, and the person I was at that time. So it was a phenomenal experience for me.
Well, I think that's a great segue to, sorry for the soundbite there. Let's try that again. I think that's a great segue to a couple points that I'll make, and then I'm going to ask a follow-up, which is you were a head coach and now you're back as an assistant. And when you become a head coach again, being able to juxtapose that first experience with what you learned in the interim, then to reapply is going to give you a leg up on where you were your first time. And my ability to retire from head coaching and then get brought back in on a whim because the JV coach at my new school retired in October, and I was coaching JV and 7th graders at the same time. And then I was coaching youth sports because my kids were little. And then when I returned to being a head coach much later, you know, my lens was different and my approach was different in a better way for the me at 40 than at 24. So I think that's going to benefit you greatly. And I'm looking forward to that when it happens. What is the best thing that you have taken with you from stop to stop and tried to not implement because it's not your program, but share, right? In regards to this was really successful. And it's just a little nugget that I think can help us get to the next level. Are there a couple of those that you can share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think that there's a ton. And each fall, like this time of year, I love it because you start pulling out those old binders of your old books of plays. And actually at this time of year, I always get this weird feeling of huge gratitude. I swear it's really weird. Like I was thinking today of somebody I want to call when I was thinking about speaking to you, just because of how many coaches have been in my life and have impacted. And this is my time of really like every fall. I feel like I'm always texting every day saying, thank you for letting me be a part of that. You know, like when I listen to Brandon Laird, and again, this is off topic, but I'm going to go to it, is Brandon Laird, who you had on this podcast, coaches at Sacramento State. He was my roommate my freshman year on the road, and he was a senior. And I still remember going after my first game, we went back to the room, we beat Cal State LA, we're all fired up, and Coach Nosa came by and he dropped off a Gatorade and a large pizza. And Gatorade for each of us and a large pizza. And B. Laird comes in, he puts it on the bed, and he goes, hey man, take as many slices as you want, I'll get whatever's done at the end. And I was like, I remember I ran out to the phone, called my dad, and I'm like, man, I can't believe I'm actually a college basketball player and I get to be a part of this. And I remember Brandon Laird just being so gracious with me and being such a good mentor to me. You know, and I was just some dumb kid that, you know, he probably was annoyed that it was in his room. Right. So I think when you ask that question, I go back to all the little nuggets that you take and just some that jump off the page. And I think for programs and coaches that at all different levels, I talked about Rob Evans and accountability, and he had something that he had taken from Eddie Sutton that he did daily, which was just a sign-in sheet. So every day he had it outside of his office, and I was in charge of it. And every guy had to come in and initial the sheet one time before practice. And I always thought it was super annoying because I was the guy that would have to make sure they all did it. But what it showed was, okay, Johnny X comes by and he's not right. Justin Kleinmo comes by and he's super happy today. He's ready to go. Or this guy is doing that. And it was a small thing, but it's something that I will always like think about. And not that you have to do a check-in sheet, but there's different ways that you can do that to reach somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was extremely special. When I was with Brooks Thompson, every year we had a coaches retreat. Mm-hmm. And we would go, and some coaching retreats you go there and it's really a waste of time. And I remember Brooks Thompson, and Jim Les did this as well. We had a coaches retreat and he was super diligent about assigning and making sure that his staff knew what they were doing and what they were really responsible for. And everybody says, hey, here's the sheet of what you're responsible for. But he was really diligent about making sure that you understood it. He talked about it in front of everybody, and whether you liked it or not, that was going to be your responsibilities. And if they weren't successful, that was solely on you. Mm-hmm. and him. Mm-hmm. And he was going to be on you about it. And I remember he was unbelievable at following through with that throughout the year. No matter if we had just lost by 30 or won by 30 on Monday, Gus, have you checked in with your academic group? And I was in charge of all the academics. Mm-hmm. So just in his staff retreat, we took truly 10 hours and we worked on our staff. And then we had a lot of fun too, which was fantastic. I think that Jim Les, something that always stands out with me is every day before practice, he made sure the guys knew a pre-practice routine. They had 7 to 10 ball handling drills they were going to do. They had 5 or 6 shooting drills they were going to do. And we did them every single day. I was in charge. Now, these are things that I bring up because I was in charge of making sure that they happened. Right. Now, as a head coach, I feel like that's one advantage I have is I've been in all these different little, pockets of the job and responsibilities. But I thought that was so great because the players came in and they knew what they were supposed to do. They knew that by the start of practice, they needed to make 100 shots and they need to have done their ball handling. So in some ways, they were going to be warmed up. I thought that coming from Nevada to Fullerton, I think Eric Musselman is one of the most creative coaches I've ever been around. And so I always talk about this. And Coach, if you ever listen to this, I'm sorry that I'm sharing your secrets. He does not like secrets to get out. But everybody's seen him do it. But, simple things. He's a huge proponent of just your preparation. And we used to put big white sheets of paper and we draw plays on the sheets of paper and put them on the sides of the bleachers or wherever we were on the road. But we would also put them on the floor prior to game. So it'd be, I'm guarding Gus Argenal. And the whole team would get out on the floor, and on the backstop of the basket, it'd say Gus Argenal. He's a right-hander. He's a shooter. His favorite move is dribble one right, spin back left. And every single person would guard a coach, that coach right there, do that move in front of everybody. And we'd all be screaming, yelling, talking about that one move. And I would tell you the amount of times that in a big moment of a game, that one play came up was insane. The amount of times that we'd go into a huddle and it'd be for an NCAA win, and we'd say, hey, go-to moves. And everybody say what the go-to move is, and we knew exactly what it was. Coach Taylor, we do something called Win the Day, whereas at the end of each day of practice, we try to do it. And again, we've just gotten to practice, so we haven't got to it yet. But again, you run a play, you huddle everybody up, you got 30 seconds, you run a play that either you've drawn up or a play that's in your bag of tricks, and it's an end of a game situation. You execute it, and you can't finish the day until you execute it correctly. And so what you get out of that is throughout a season, if you practice 60 times, that's 60 times you've created an end of a game situation, which you would have never done. And as we know as coaches, we forget to do that so often. And it gives you also a chance to draw up a play and practice as a coach. So again, there's 4 or 5 things that just randomly, and I'll give you one more from Greg Klink. Now, Greg Klink, and again, I would say is one of the best leaders, I've ever been around. But I got this thing from Greg, and it's just called check your aggression at the door. So we would put up a red piece of paper above the door when it was high alert time for our players. And the players knew that when they would walk through the door, the red door of practice, and if there was a red piece of tape up there on that top of that door, that it was like high alert, like you were in a submarine. And you better be dialed in when you walk in that gym. And to that day, I did it differently at East Bay. But when we walked in the gym, I would put like caution tape above the door. Yeah. And guys knew like, coach means business this week, or this is not going to be your normal day. And just so little funny things like that. And there's so many that you can think back to.
Well, I think the sample size there is great. And, you know, when we get offline or we come back again, there'll be a million other options. But I think the idea here is the creativity and what works for a particular coach, right? So the pre-practice routine, we do something that we just call vitamins, and the kids know it's every day. You take your vitamins and you're ready to go. And then, you know, the win the day at the close of that is a great way to implement what you said. If you do that every day, you're getting 60 reps at a after timeout or an end of game situation that we all forget to execute in practice because it's on the practice plan, but something's going to run over. And I think the irony of the red alert moment and the intensity check from Greg, considering the epic one-on-one full court games that you guys used to play to stay in shape over the years that nobody knows about, probably fits that personality mode. But what, in addition to your basketball journey, where again, you have so much more experience with different than the majority of people, and for them to try to go and get that experience is probably impossible, but there are other ways to do that, right? Watching other teams on your campus, coaching youth sports and getting reps doing that. In what way has that experience shown up for you, either through coaching your kids, looking at your colleagues who don't necessarily coach your sport, or maybe they do, but how have you been able to supplement your learning there?
Well, I would say that for coaches that are trying to gain more of that experience of learning from different people, I do think that be super intentional about trying to meet those people. And again, I'm going to go to the other coaches I'm around, but one thing I've always tried to do, no matter what level, was like go have a cup of coffee with somebody that you really are inspired by. Like try to push yourself through the door. And again, that was for me also, and I'm very honest about it, is to network with people, to stay in coaching. It's super hard to do that. So yeah, you may seem awkward texting somebody to go meet up with them, but if I don't text Jim Les to meet up with him, Jim Les doesn't know who Gus Argenal is other than I played at Davis, and he's not going to hire me there. So I think you have to do that. On every campus, and again, I was lucky. I went to De La Salle. I studied De La Salle football. And the head coach there is Justin Allenbaugh now, who is a friend of mine. And I think that you would be insane if you don't steal from the people that you're around at all these different levels. And so something that like I took always from De La Salle football was they would have a chapel Friday before every game. And again, it's a spiritual school, it's a Catholic school, so it's a little bit different. That can be a team meeting or a team dinner before Friday night. And I would do that with my team at East Bay. You know, and again, I kind of started a tradition because of them. Was at the end of the year, no matter however many seniors I had, let's say it was 4, with the last 4 games going to the end of the year, each senior had a night where they gave the pregame talk. And the last game of the year, and they do this at De La Salle, all the parents come into that locker room. And so I had all the parents come in on my last night at the last home game, and the last senior, who usually was like one of our leaders, would give that last speech. And I just thought that was such a powerful thing. And then we'd walk out and do our senior night things. When we were at Nevada, Nevada was a place that the coaches really shared. And I would say that somebody that I took a lot from, this is maybe different, not so much the coaches, but the athletic director. One of them was Rory Hickok. And I really studied him with how he handled people in the community and what he did and how he organized them and what he did daily. His door was always open, but he was never there because he was always out. He was always out with people. I'd see him, and literally every time I saw him on campus, he had somebody that obviously was in the community that he was walking around showing the new football facility, or that he was showing this or that. When I was at Davis, both times, Davis has a storied football tradition, and Bob Biggs was one of the greatest leaders that I've ever been around. And I met him when I was 18, and you guys forced me to go sell raffle tickets to get money for our program. I knocked on his door. I'm 18, and suddenly the door opens. He's having like a Halloween party or something. And I've got my Davis stuff on. And he's like, "Did they really send you to my neighborhood? Get in here." He gave me dinner, and I hung out. And then I think he bought all my tickets for me, so I didn't have to do anything. I got off easy. But I studied him. I still remember this. Greg Klink and I were sitting it was a Saturday morning practice. We got done in Hickey, and we're sitting in the locker room, and Bob Biggs walks in, and he's getting ready for a big Division II football game. And he sits there and he goes, man, gosh, guys, isn't this a great day for a game? And Coach Klink and I always say this, it was like Eric Parseghian, but the aura he had and the confidence and just his feeling, I always took that from him as like, wow, this is a football coach who is so in tune with himself and comfortable. And I always said, I want to have that type of confidence as a coach for my team. And so when I walk in the locker room, I want to be spastic inside and crazy, but I want to show them that I'm ready to go and I'm super prepared. I think that when you look at different programs, the one thing you have to understand is everybody has their time of the year where they're all stressed out. And one thing that I really like seeing and asking coaches is, how do you handle your stress?
Mm-hmm. Great question.
What do you do? What do you do? And I think that right now in our day and age in this society is, I talk to a lot of coaches about this, is the great leaders, I think, are not only just great in tough moments, but they're just really good at handling their stress with their players, their staff. They're not moody. They know how to walk in the office and exude what needs to happen in their program. And I think I've learned that from coaches. For an example, our women's volleyball coach at Fullerton, she had a tough string of years, and last year then suddenly she just jumps on the stage and she wins coach of the year and takes a program. But she was so diligent and just continuing to build. And our conversations, I think that you have to really respect your hallway conversations. When you walk by, and everybody says, well, when you walk by the janitor, you have to respect them, for sure. But you really got to respect and get to know that golf coach that might give you a tidbit about recruiting that you didn't know about Fullerton, or you didn't know that at UNR in Reno, there's this really cool golf course that you could have taken a recruit to. I think you take all these little pieces. And then I'd like to see the preparation. And obviously football prepares at an extremely high level. One thing about soccer, and again, when I was at UTSA, I was really close to the soccer staff. And soccer is conceptual. You're not running as many plays because you can't control the ball as well. And I remember them talking to me about small space games. And that was something that inspired me at East Bay to make guys play one-on-one in really small spaces and not allow them to go all over one side of the floor. I put them literally in like a 10-foot spot. Right. And I always brought that from UTSA because the soccer coaches, I'd go out there and watch it on a nice day, and they were really into that. So I think concepts, what can you take? I don't journal, so I'm not good at that. But I will take a thing that I've learned, or I will steal something from a website and I drop it in my Dropbox. So I have like this, I call it inspiration box, that I have so much stuff. It's insane. Probably a letter from you where you said I wasn't good enough and I don't know if I can recruit you anymore. But I think you got to have a way to store your knowledge as well.
Yeah. And I think that the takeaway there that I'm going to point to for the listeners is, when you were at East Bay, you said you didn't necessarily respect the hallway conversation enough and the working relationship with your non-basketball colleagues, and you've grown to appreciate that through your other stops, and that those aren't just transactional areas to pick up knowledge, but the relationship that is sincere, that you can even point back to UTSA. I'm learning from soccer, has nothing to do with basketball, but I can apply this. I think it's really important for young coaches out there, and heck, even us as veterans, to remember that the tunnel vision is helpful at times, but to take a step back, get your routines together to handle stress. And Coach Biggs, part of that might have been him playing pickup at lunch with us on game days and getting it out of his system. But over the years, how has your approach to coaching changed from when you first got into it to now, other than age? But what can you point to specifically that has changed about your approach?
That's such a good question, because I think that your approach changes. And again, I told you this off record, but my wife gets upset with me because she's, as you asked me, what's your 5-year, what's your 10-year plan? I think that for me in coaching, so many things have changed. And not so much my why I coach, because that's always been my relationships. And so that's been the same. Like I have my best friends in my life went to UC Davis, played college basketball with me, were high school friends with me. They were athletes. They're my best friends in the world. It gave me so much. So why would my why and why I coach or how I coach change with that? Now, how I recruit has changed. How I speak to student athletes and their parents has changed, obviously, because I have more gray hair and I have 2 boys that are 11 and 9. Coaches say that you speak to players differently. when you have children. I don't know if how I speak to them has changed, but I will say that at times I realize that my time is so much even more important than what I thought it was then. That me giving this hour on the floor to this young man that wants to work on his game. When I was 27, I didn't have kids. Okay, I could give you 20 hours. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go home to my wife and we're going to hang out. When you have a child of your own, now you value your time more. And so then my value of giving this time to this young man is even more. So when I go into it, I'm going to pour into that hour. Like it is Bo Argenal, my son, and I'm showing him which Bo doesn't listen to me when I work out with him. So I don't even know why I do that. And that's a whole nother story about COVID and what it's taught me. But I think you value that. I think that how I handle a certain situation has changed. I think I used to get my anxiety would just start popping. I got to handle this now. And I think that you have to slow down. And Diedrich Taylor has actually taught me this now even more so is before you come to your coach, before you come to your administrator, you need to have more information. And again, I'm 39 and I'm learning this from Diedrich now. He probably gets annoyed at me because I am like shoot by the hip sometimes, whether it's a recruit, whether it's a situation, and you need to slow down. You need to think about it. You need to make sure that you have all the information. You need to take your emotion out of it. Because I think my strength is my weakness. I'm passionate. You can hear me talk. I get going. It's like, slow down, big fella. As Bob Williams used to say, hey, junior, calm down, right? So, and there's a lot of other stories that go with that other coaches have told me. But slow down, really know the information at hand. I think that as a head coach, I learned that more because you have to think about long-term, not just what's going to happen this very second. So how you handle a player, a situation with a parent, slow down. So that's been a big change with me, not so much from the hip because now you have more responsibility. But to be honest with you, I am the exact same coach that I was when I was 26 in terms of when I walk on the floor, I'm going to walk in clapping. I think that it goes too often coaches think they have to be cool. And what coaches need to be is a cheerleader. And again, you don't need to show that you're so smart.
Right.
I think I'm super smart. I know you're super smart. I know this guy. Just go out there and have fun with these guys and embrace it, get juice, get excited. Now that's me.
Right.
You know, I've been like that my whole life. And some guys would say, well, he's too nice to this guy. No. I've had a lot of hard situations that I've handled and do. But if I'm going to do this and I'm going to coach, like I'm going to have juice when I walk in there. And so I would say that even more so now, I'm even more fired up than I was when I was 26. Because at that time, or 23 when I started, because I was trying to feel myself out. Now I know who I am even more. And I can be that even more. And I would never let that change. I'm not a negative coach. I'm a positive coach.
Yeah. And the authenticity of that and how it speaks to your personality is what you have become ultra comfortable with at this point. It's like, this is who I am. This is what you're getting. I'm going to show up as my best self every day. And I'm over trying to figure that piece out. And this is what you're going to get. And I think that's super valuable because as a young coach or somebody starting in the business, you can be old, whatever, even as a teacher. And I'm sure in the business world, you're trying to learn from your mentors and apply what works for you. And then when you finally get to that place of security, let's call it, all right, it opens up a lot of opportunity for you to grow and your athletes to benefit from seeing somebody as their authentic self. And I think that's gold. Last question. If we jumped in the DeLorean, since you are still from my era and know what that reference is, even though many people might not, and we had a time machine and we go back to that era when you were getting started, I want to say, what would you do differently? Because I think our journeys are what shapes us. But what advice would you have for your younger self?
The biggest one that I always say is run your own race. I think that for all of us in everything we do, whether you're a high school coach, whether you're a high school teacher, whether you're a lawyer, there's going to be super, and I say this just being honest, super annoying, tough times of your career for yourself individually where you have to step back and ask, why do I coach? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to accomplish? And I'm super competitive, and in coaching, your ego can get into it so much. And I look at all the people that you know in coaching, and we all have our different stops and different path. Like you said, my path has been so different. GA, ops, assistant, Division II assistant, Conference UA assistant, Division II coach, coaching in Nevada, living a lifelong dream, being in the top 5 in the country, assistant at Fullerton in the Big West, working for some of that work. You're going to have all these stops. And if you look into the left and the right, you won't be not only just where you are, like coach always says, be where your feet are. But it's like when you walk in the door with your family, you're thinking about what happens at work. Well, you're not a great dad. Mm-hmm. You're not a great son. You're not a great husband. And so I've had moments, and I'll give this example, and I say it all the time. One of my best friends, Rob Eson. And I always go back to this moment in my life. I'm walking in the office at UTSA. I'm an ops guy. My office is a closet that I share with Jay Spoonhour. I'm making about $25,000 a year. I feel like I'm making hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? In Texas, San Antonio, really thinking I'm growing as a coach. I get a call from Rob Eson, who at that time is an assistant at the University of Maryland. And he's a year younger than me. He says, Gus, you're not going to believe this. Gary Williams just retired. I am now the interim head coach at Maryland. and I go, I'm on the phone, and I tell him this all the time. I'm super like, I'm jumping up and down, going crazy for him. I hang up the phone, and I started crying. And again, this is as honest as I can be about it. And it's a selfish thing, but I always look back at it and say, at that moment, I was too worried about everybody else's journey and not my own. And I wanted to be a Division I assistant. I wanted to be a head coach. Well, I'm going to be that. And I would tell myself, you're going to do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And I would tell yourself there's going to be multiple times where you don't know if you can do that, but you're going to end up doing it. Like, you're going to get it done because you're a good person and you do things the right way. But run your own race and really, really at times, like, take that moment to text your buddy that's having great success. Mm-hmm. And not just when they're struggling, because I've been at times where I've been at a 5-win season and a 29-win season playing the Sweet 16. So I've had everyone in between. And it's interesting to see who follows up with you when you're doing really well, mm-hmm. and who follows up with you when you're doing poorly, mm-hmm. and everything in between there. And I would say that to myself is just continue to like help move like everybody, the higher the tide, it moves all boats. Everybody that has success in our business, like Deidre Taylor being the head coach here, if he wouldn't have that success, my family couldn't live in Huntington Beach and have what we're having now as a family, coaching for somebody that I love and want him to do so well. But if he doesn't have all the success that he had, I can't be a part of his success and his journey. Mm-hmm. And so you have to remember that. So continue to run your own race, and do the best you can where you are. Try to win as much as you can, but also remember that it is about what you leave behind you when you leave and the job that you do. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would pass along.
No, that's so good. And I think the highlights of that are that everybody's timeline is very different. And as soon as you use the words, look into your left and your right, it's something I took away from my first PGC camp, which is drop your expectations, drop your comparisons. It's going to help you be way happier and help you focus on what's best for you and your program. And as soon as you can do that, the doors swing wide open. And so I think that's a great analogy to end on, and something that anybody, they don't even have to be a coach. You said the kids you've learned in COVID don't listen to you. Welcome to parenting. Yeah. They'll listen to this later, and they're taking those lessons and telling their friends about them. They're just not going to let you know that they heard you. So I appreciate you sharing that story and being with us today, Coach, and look forward to catching up a little bit later.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.